Kinda Murdery is sponsored by helladoge.com. That's HELLADOGE.com. The only social media website that pays 80% of its profits out to real users in real Dogecoin just for doing what you do anyway. It's a blast on there, guys. Get out of the Facebook game. Get into the crypto game. helladoge.com.
Warning! Kinda Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
This is Kinda Murdery Insomniac. Stories to stay awake by. Good evening, and welcome to Kinda Murdery Insomniac. I'm your host, Zevon Odelberg. Thank you for deciding to be here. I want to begin, dear Legion of the Bloodshot Eye, with a warning. Tonight's story is a truly heinous tale, one you would perhaps be better off remaining ignorant about. So if you would prefer to cling to your feeble illusions that all humans are fundamentally good, I suggest you turn this off now. This is your opportunity to escape the horror perpetrated by the Fort Bragg Forest Fiend. Are you still with us? Good. Here we go. This stomach-churning narrative of the murder of little Theresa Johnson by Thomas LeHue, here named the Fort Bragg Forest Fiend, is pieced together from 3 newspaper articles. The first is the Fort Bragg Advocate on Wednesday, May 29th, 1929. The next is the Mendocino Beacon, Saturday, July 13th, 1929. And finally, the Healdsburg Tribune on Friday, August 1st, 1930. This is Kinda Murdery Insomniac. Stories to stay awake by. And now, if you dare, follow me into the darkness of the Mendocino County woods, where a young life is snuffed out too soon. The brutal murder of little Theresa Johnson of East Mendocino has thoroughly aroused the people of this coast. They are waiting with patience, however, and confidence that Sheriff Burns will, in a brief time, bring the fiend to justice. Suspicion has pointed to Tom LeHue, 32 years of age, who has not been able to give a satisfactory account of where he was on the afternoon of the murder. Clothing of the child with traces of blood was submitted by Burns to E.O. Heinrich, scientific criminologist of Berkeley. Clothing of LeHue was also submitted, and it is understood that blood traces were found on it. Further than this, nothing has been given out by the authorities. Comparatively little is known about LeHue, who has been residing in the East Mendocino section for about a year, and who had lived in Southern California. Reports have it that he is slightly unbalanced mentally. Late Wednesday afternoon of last week, 7-year-old Theresa Johnson left the East Mendocino schoolhouse in the company of a little playmate and school companion named Marley Fox. These children walked along the roadway, carefree and happy, for half a mile or more until their paths separated, and this little girlfriend, Marley Fox, aside from the murderer, was the last to see Theresa Johnson alive. The two children apparently separated somewhere around 3 o'clock. Little Theresa was accustomed to arrive home before 4 o'clock, and after waiting a reasonable time, thinking she had probably been delayed along the way to play or gather flowers, her father started out after her. He failed to find her along the road or at the schoolhouse, so he then sought the help of his neighbors, and an alarm was sounded throughout the community that the child had disappeared, and practically everyone in the section turned out to search for her. When no immediate trace of her was found, a telephone appeal was made to Mendocino for help, and the telephone office there spread the alarm, and this call for searchers was immediately met, and in a half-hour's time, 150 people were on their way to East Mendocino by automobile. Clarence Nix, principal of the Mendocino School, who was in charge of the Boy Scouts, took all of his available scouts, and the prairie section from the branch road where the little girl left her playmate was soon being combed by searchers. Reverend Spaulding, with a band of Boy Scouts from here, also went down and joined in the search. Even with this massive effort, it took some time before definite trace of the child was found. Her footprints were followed down the branch road leading to her home for a quarter of a mile or more, and then apparently she left the roadway and entered a brush-covered area. Finally, about 8 o'clock in the evening, her lunch bucket was found. Her little coat was carefully folded and held under the handle of the bucket, apparently as she had started out from school with it. Discovery of the lunch bucket caused the searchers to redouble their efforts, and within a few minutes after it was picked up, the body of the child was found, lying across a small log, face downwards. The body was found by Mr. Nix and James Cleary. Examination showed the little girl to be dead. Her limbs were already set and stiff, indicating she had been dead for some hours. A first examination of the child revealed marks at her throat. While those first viewing the marks were not prepared to say just what caused them, they were confident it was not the work of an animal. A later and careful examination made by Sheriff Burns, who arrived here from Ukiah about 10 o'clock that evening, and by the autopsy surgeon and others, points quite conclusively to strangulation. Evidently, the throat was gripped in a powerful hand, and the child strangled as the marks on the throat showed that the fingers gripped on one side and the thumb on the other. Stuart Johnson and wife, the heartbroken parents of the little child, have been residents of the East Mendocino section for something like a year. The father is a native of Ohio and attended the State Agricultural College there. When World War I broke out, he went overseas with the 23rd Engineers. He served 18 months in France and saw some hard fighting and was shell-shocked. While in France, he met Mary Ledoux, a French girl, and after returning to the United States and regaining his health, he went back to France and claimed her as his bride. They selected California for their home and finally located at their present residence. Johnson has been making good with a small truck garden and with poultry. And with their 2 children, Theresa and a younger daughter 2.5 years old. They had been quite happy in their new location. But then along came tragedy, and the mother, never overly strong, is prostrate from the blow, while the father has aged materially from the strain. The inquest was held Sunday evening, and Coroner William Ornbaum's testimony stated that the child had been criminally assaulted and strangled to death. In hopes of receiving some clemency due to a plea of insanity, giant woodsman Tom LaHue has given the following full confession of his guilt. I got up about 5:45 in the morning and took care of the chickens and had breakfast at about 7:30. Then I got ready and went with my father to work. We loaded up a load of wood and hauled it up to the house about 11 a.m. and I sawed it up. I worked until about 1 p.m., then I had dinner. Then I went in the house and finished a story which I was reading in a magazine. Then I went out and fed the chickens and gave them some greens. Dad and Mother were working on a chicken fence when I left the house. I went down through the oat field to where we've been chopping wood in the morning. I did not have a watch with me when I left the house. I went down to where we'd been chopping, and then I went around Johnson's fence on the outside of the property, going east toward the main Willits Road. I also went around the wire fence on the south side and the property owned by Mrs. Reckwig. I did not cross through any wire fences, but went around them. Part of the time I was on the old road, and part of the time I was not. I went up to where Theresa Johnson's body was found, and I waited there about 10 minutes before she came along the road. I do not remember seeing her put the lunch bucket, sweater, and book down. I was there not more than 20 minutes altogether until I returned to where I had been chopping brush. I did not take hold of the little girl where she left her lunch bucket, but over by the log where the body was found. I don't remember what happened then, as my mind seemed to be dazed. I never followed the old road back, but walked along through the brush. I returned to where I'd been chopping brush earlier in the day and worked there until I returned home in the evening at about 6:20 p.m. I have not been made any promises by the sheriff or any of his deputies. Deputy Sheriff Al McCabe having said I was insane, I would be treated right. I have not been abused or used rough by the sheriff or any of his deputies. So he was in a daze, huh? Here is an excerpt from what the judge had to say to Mr. Tom LaHue on the day he was convicted. You have been fairly tried and justly convicted upon evidence that admits of no possible doubt of the most heinous and revolting crime that has ever been perpetrated in this or any other county. You not only brutally throttled to death an innocent and defenseless child, but you also satisfied your abnormal animal passion upon her prostrate body. It is impossible for me to understand how any normal person who calls himself a man could become so depraved and commit such a cowardly and dastardly crime. Your brutal assault and murder sent to a premature grave a child who had never harmed any person in the world and who doubtless never had an evil thought. A child of so much promise, whose entire life was before her. You have also brought untold mental and physical suffering upon the child's invalid mother and heartbroken father. My sincere sympathy goes out to them. You, without cause or provocation, cruelly murdered the child and left her mutilated body in the woods to be preyed upon by the beasts of the forest. You fled from the scene of your crime like a thief in the night with the blood of an innocent child upon your clothing, and, as the cunning hypocrite that the evidence shows you are, you joined the searching party under the pretext of looking for this murdered child, when you knew that you had cruelly murdered her and knew where her body lay. You also committed perjury of the rankest kind in this case. The jury did not believe your testimony, and I did not believe it. It was false and fabricated from beginning to end. I have not the slightest doubt of your guilt, and I doubt whether any unbiased person who heard the testimony could doubt your guilt at all. The jury should be congratulated for meting out to you the punishment which you so richly deserve. Whatever I might say to you would be of no assistance to you, and my advice to you is to make your peace with your God, if that is possible. And I say again, if the crime you have committed be one that can be forgiven by the Almighty, my advice to you is to seek forgiveness. Bailiff, take the defendant. On August 1st, 1930, barely more than a year after he crushed the life from young Theresa Johnson, at San Quentin Prison, Thomas LeHue, now 33, refused all religious rites and hung from the neck for 13 full minutes until dead. I'm Zevon Odelberg, and this has been Kinda Murdery Insomniac. Stories to stay awake by.
Kinda Murdery Insomniac is created, researched, edited, produced, and hosted by Zevon Odelberg, with opening theme by Niall Madden and art by the Gin of Lang. Available now on all podcasting platforms. If you like the show, please subscribe, review, and tell your friends. You can find us on social media at Kinda Murdery or email at kindamurdery@gmail.com.